support, and everybody sees that they need support. Mozambique requested Rwanda to work with them, support them in fighting the religious radical insurgency that was happening in one province called Cabo Delgado, which is 3 times the size of my country, geographically. So we went there because they requested, and we've been doing a good job with our friends and partners in Mozambique. Mozambique also accepted others to come and help. That's a different issue. I will not talk about that. I'll talk about what concerns Rwanda. The place we deployed in, which is in that part of Cabo Delgado, which was mainly affected, we resolved the problem over the last 2 years and some months, maybe 80% or 85% of that, working with the locals, working with the Mozambicans. Having really 2 tasks. One was to actually deliver security using our own, even if you would say limited capacity, but it is effective on the ground. And working together with the Mozambicans, we were able to do that. And if you look at the cost of it, it's a very, small cost if compared to what has been with other peacekeeping operations that have been going on. Now, but even then, you can see that, as we were saying, lessons that are not learned even with time. The international community, which sometimes expresses support for Mozambique and this and that, do very little, in fact, to support this kind of thing, this model where Africans are getting together, working together to deliver the security that is required in different parts of the country. That is, whether we are talking about Mozambique or Central African Republic. I mean, you ask yourself, if what is needed, what people want, is just the final product of delivering security, stability, so that, and in fact, these countries are countries with huge resources, and some of them have attracted investments from these developed countries. Instead of supporting that, they are not doing so. Well, they know if they even bring their model to work in there, bringing UN peacekeepers and so on and so forth. Well, they haven't done it, but even if they brought it, maybe it would be similar to what is happening in the DRC. So you wonder then, and this question keeps coming up anyway in everything, whether we learn lessons. And therefore, I don't think we do, because if we did, then we would be seeing what works actually working. But you find what works is not even encouraged to work. It is even undermined. In fact, some questions being asked in Mozambique, you see, but Rwanda in Mozambique, but they are also in Congo. And therefore, that stops. They think by not helping this operation in which Rwanda is heavily involved, they are punishing Rwanda. I don't know for what.
Right.
But actually, they are punishing Mozambique, not Rwanda, because that's what the problem is. So I don't understand the logic. I don't understand what.
So let me ask you a question about what you see as blind spots of the West when it thinks about security in Africa. So, when I think about it, you mentioned the DRC, and recently, I think about a week ago, our State Department said to your government and to you, you need to punish part of your own forces, which the United States assert cooperated with M23 in some attacks inside the DRC. And I don't want to get into a discussion of who did what to whom. Your government has denied that. I'm more interested in the question of what is the Paul Kagame plan if you were to talk to Blinken and to Sullivan, which I know you have done. See, this is how, from your perspective, this needs to be fixed. But I'm interested in a more broad question as well. We've seen a lot of coups, Niger, Guinea, various places, in the region. And you've just recently traveled to some of these countries just in the past week. What are we getting wrong in understanding stability in Africa that you think the United States and Europe can, significantly improve on?
Well, to begin with, what I would do if I would be talking to these leaders in those countries, like United States and others, I would start by telling them that they can do much, much better than that. Because in the end, they are really doing nothing. Passing statements of condemnation and blaming this or that without addressing the problem, I think simply adds to the problem, doesn't address it. So that's what I would start with telling them. And for every problem, there is a root cause. You simply look at the root cause of the problem and what the problem is, and work with the parties involved to address what needs to be addressed, in your sense, and reduce on the politics, on the interest, on this, on that. I mean, some of these things, they just don't go away unless you do what is necessary to be done that underlies the problem. I mean, it doesn't need a lot of capacity to think or what. What all of us have can serve us to understand the issues like this. So that's what I would tell them. Now, if you extend it across the continent, the main failure on our continent and these other places where there is a failure of governance and security. Both of them which are needed for any society to stabilize and function the way it should and the way the people would wish to see happen. So if you look at countries where coup d'etats have been happening, nobody wishes to see coup d'etats happen in any place. There's nothing to celebrate about that. But at the same time, you don't stop there. You just don't condemn coups without even trying to find out, basically, what is it that led to this point? What was it that was lacking for a coup to happen? This is when you start seeing signs of that in governance or lack of security, as we have seen mainly in some of these countries in West Africa. I mean, these are things that anyone can see. You don't need to dig deep to investigate. You can see it. In fact, you can see it before it has happened, and you can tell that something is going to happen in this place or the other. So why can't people, first on our own continent, the Africans ourselves, in fact, which, again, we have talked about that, the way within Africa, Africans can work together to address a problem like we did in Mozambique or in Central African Republic. But with even developed countries, support or involvement the right way, it would happen faster and more easily. So why doesn't it happen? They all concentrate now on condemning. By the way, it is funny, it is in fact ridiculous, because in some cases, they would condemn people in certain places where coups have happened and be quiet in similar cases. on the
Right.
same. Like you see, even the failure of governance, they attack, countries, lack of democracy, lack of freedom, lack of human rights, lack of this. And where some of these are lacking the most, but because of the interests that people have in those countries, it will be muted. Effectively, nothing to be talked about that. So are we really addressing the problems the way they should be addressed, or we are just posturing and talking about, need for this and giving lectures and
Right.
so on and so
Let me try to squeeze in a couple of more quick questions before we go. One big one, I think, is, in our past discussions, I remember talking to you when you visited Washington for the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. And at that time, you were beginning to think, about the broader U.S.-Rwanda relationship. That relationship had some barriers in it, including Paul Rusesabagina being in prison. Your justice system commuted his sentence. A lot of progress has been made on the stumbling blocks in between Rwanda and the United States. But at the time when you were in Washington, you said, Washington kind of goes up and down. It has a tension and then it disappears. And you said it's very inconsistent. I'm interested in whether there's now a consistency of attention in the relationship between the Biden White House and the Biden State Department, over the importance of relations with you and Rwanda, or whether it is something that goes to sleep for a while and then awakens when there's a crisis or a problem. What is what's the terrain of that relationship?
I think you can take my previous statement when you were in Washington. It hasn't changed much. And when I answered that question, I was also conscious that things don't change so easily anyway in some cases. And with this one, it wasn't going to change. But, and for example, Rusesabagina should not have been a case to quarrel about between the United States and Rwanda anyway, to begin with.
Right.
But and we dealt with it because it was there to be dealt with. And we tried to do it the best way we could. We got it out of the way.
But even getting beyond that, you're not having, nirvana in U.S.-Rwanda relations, is what I'm hearing.
No
nirvana. Well, let me just ask you really. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
You are going to sleep and waking up. This time there hasn't been waking up. It has been.
I'm sure that's going to be tweeted somewhere. And look, the other controversial thing you and I have discussed before is the UK's Illegal Migration Act. Rwanda hosts and brings into Rwanda as part of a relationship with the UK. Asylum seekers come in, and Rwanda has been designated as a safe place and harbor by UK courts. And, that's controversial with a lot of people. It's controversial in some, with a judge in Northern Ireland, et cetera. You and I have talked about the environment, the jobs, et cetera, that you're trying to do for these employees. What's interesting to me is that a poll inside the EU has recently said that more than half of EU member states want the same deal with Rwanda, would like to have that kind of relationship. And, it's a complicated subject because asylum and dealing with people that are running away from whatever trauma or circumstance in their life there. But I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And the fact is that despite the controversy that some attach to this practice of moving folks to Rwanda, which I imagine is both economic development, but it's something you're thinking about with regards to population growth. But the fact that a lot of other nations in the EU want it, what are your thoughts about that? Do you want to expand the program?
Yeah, putting the controversy aside, we in Rwanda, we insist on trying to do things the best way we can. And there will be people who criticize, there are others who will appreciate.